Okay, so we are at Chof Hey Amid Beis, the Mishnah. We finished the Sugya, and we're starting this Mishnah. And this Mishnah continues in the tradition of the Parak about finding Metzias, but you'll see that there's a twist here on how this Mishnah lays out these questions. It's a little bit different than the way we've been learning it. Someone finds something, and it's from the perspective really of the finder that we've been talking. Here, it's a little bit different. You'll see in a minute. That's the Mishnah. Motza acha hagapa or acha hageder. If someone finds something behind a gapa or a geder. So Rashi tells us, Motza acha hagapa or hageder. We're talking about gozlos mukushar. We're talking about pigeons, as the Mishnah will say. So if someone found pigeons that were tied up, their legs were tied up, they couldn't fly. Gapa stimas kosher shel eitz or shel kinin. A gapa is made out of wood or out of reeds. Geder shel avodim. So again, motza acha hagapa or hageder gozlos mukusharim. Pigeons that were tied, or b'shvilin shebesados, or they were placed in the paths of the field. So what are we talking about? We're talking about Rosh Hashanah, what are we talking about? So if you recall that our Gemara was talking about where you, in some cases, where you had a Rosh Hashanah that was totally unused and no one passed by there. And then there was some parts of it where, whether someone grew some wheat or some oats or whatever it happened to be. So the Gemara is talking about those kinds of circumstances, not a pure Rosh Hashanah, but a place, whether it's a Carmelis or Rosh Hashanah, but it's private to everybody and no one really goes there. So this fellow went ahead. He saw a fence of some kind that was in the ground, and he said, "You know what? I'm going to put my precious pigeons. They can't fly away. I'm going to stick them over there, and at some point in time, I'll come back." So says the Mishnah, "Harizeh lo yigav." If someone is walking along and sees these pigeons behind a fence in an area that people don't go, lo yigav, he should not touch them. Rashi. The ein zu aveda shia muzer alea. This is not an aveda. It's not something that, oh, I found a pigeon. Now I'm going to go ahead and announce I found a pigeon behind a fence along, Route 9. That's Rashi. That's not what this is about. Because he put him there in order to guard them. So a person shouldn't touch them. The Gemara is going to explain further in detail about this Indian, but that's the general rule. The Mishnah says, "Lo yiga behem."
Excuse me, Rabbi.
Yeah.
I see Stuart just signed in. He may have a refuah shleima. Stuart, Margot.
Thank you. Udal bat Rachel.
Udal bat Rachel.
And Eliyahu Chaim Tzvi ben Milka.
Eliyahu Chaim Tzvi ben Milka.
Thank you very much.
So it says the Mishnah Lo yiga behem. Now, Mishnah goes on. All this will be explained in the Gemara. Matzah kliba ashba. We have this reference previously in the Gemara to this Mishnah. If someone finds a kli in a trash can, im mechusa, if the can is covered, lo yigabo, shouldn't touch it. In mugula no tolamachos. If it's an open can and it's sitting there, then he should pick it up and he should announce it. And he said, "Did anybody lose?" And someone will come and give a sin. All right, so this is the Mishnah. And again, we've had references to this Mishnah from the previous Gemara, so it's not totally unfamiliar to us. Now, here we go. So now we're going to try to really get into this question of a person who hides something with the idea of coming back, and what is the achrayas of a finder? Does a finder have to do something with it? Correct the Gemara. My Tama, why does the finder not even deal with what's there? He leaves it alone. the Omrinon Hana Inish, it's the Neo. This person hid it. In other words, the finder shouldn't touch it because the person who left it there hid it. Now here's the key: if he should take it and announce it, then the owner has no siman. It's just a bird. It's an undistinguished bird, which he hid and put away for himself. So what's going to happen here is that the finder will go ahead and take the bird, announce it, and the real owner will not have a siman. Hilchach l'shavkina ad osumare b'shakalahu. Says the Gemara, you should wait until the owner comes back. Now, if over a longer period of time the owner to come back, then we could say maybe it's hefker. But clearly, if he stumbles upon it, he should take no action because he'll undo what the real owner meant. Since there's no siman, but he hid it, you should leave it hidden. Frek the Gemara of Amai, why are we worried about it? They have a kesher simna. Let the kesher, remember he tied him up, right? Goes los mikusharim. So let the kesher be a siman, and so he announces it, and someone can say, "Oh yeah, I did a whatever kind of knot, a fisherman's knot, or whatever it happens to be." Amar Rava bar Zavda, Amar Rav mikusharim bekanfehen. Kula alma hocha machtule. You know, sometimes I've seen it that people take a bird and they take the wings and they intertwine the wings. Somehow they take one wing and tuck it under another wing so that the bird now is immobile or the bird can't fly. So he wants to answer that there was no kesher. There was no specific kesher that could identify, that this owner could identify with. He just intertwined the wings. The kula alma hacha machtule. Everybody does that. In other words, if someone finds a bird and wants to incapacitate it, he doesn't tie it up. He takes the wings and he somehow puts one wing under another and he mixes the wing, and now the bird can't fly.
Excuse me, Rabbi. This is my last interruption. Jonathan came on, and I think he may have some dedications. Jonathan?
Just a minute. Did you make a dedication for Shalema for Chava Naomi bat Dova Chana?
Chava Naomi bat Dova Chana.
Bat Dova Chana. Okay, thank you.
Rabbi, I'm finished for today for interrupting.
Okay, well, I got an interruption. What about the condition of the birds? If they look like they're starving or something, the guy didn't come back to feed them. I mean, if they're tied together, they may not be able to eat. So he would have to, if they were going to be used, he'd have to come back fairly soon.
Yeah, I mean, I think tying the wings probably doesn't have anything to do with their ability to use their beak to eat. But you have a good point. Is that there's the whole question of whether or not you leave those birds in that condition for a longer period of time. What does it do to the birds? Right. Mm-hmm. So again, we're not talking about long periods of time. If someone walks by, he finds the birds behind the fence, leave it alone. Leave it alone, because it seems that would be an indication someone hid them and he wants to come back and get them. Now, you can come back a few days later, even a week, whatever it happens to be. If you see those birds still there, then again, that may be a judgment call that you have to say, listen, so worst comes to worst, I'll throw it a few seeds. In other words, I won't necessarily take it, but I'll make sure it has a little bowl of water or some seeds or something else. Again, there's not an achrayas in someone to do it, but someone sees it, he'll be compassionate and do it. Those are side questions. They're good questions, but they're side questions to the point of what should he do. So assuming everything else is neutral, that there isn't an issue on the health of the birds or everything else, the Mishnah says, don't touch it, because someone will definitely come back, probably very shortly. He hid it there, and he meant to come back very short. So, okay, so that's how he used to leave it. Frek the Gemara, another kasha. So clearly, kesher is not a siman. Frek the Gemara of Alabe Mokum siman. Remember, we had a machlokes a couple blot back between Rava and Rava, whether Mokum is a siman, and the Gemara says that according to Rava, Mokum is a siman. So why can't he announce? He should go ahead and announce, and the real owner will know it. It's not going to be a question of he has no siman. Of course he knows. Oh, that little corner of Yay Field that has a wooden fence. You'll find I put the birds behind there. So that's a good siman. So the Gemara asks Akasha v'lahav makom siman. Let the makom be a siman. Why are we not including makom, at least according to Rava? Omar Rav Ukvar bar Chama says Rav Ukvar bar Chama b'medadin. So he says that these birds can still hop. So now b'medadin, we're worried that maybe these birds were not from behind the fence. Maybe these birds were from somewhere else and they hopped to where the fence is. So therefore, the finder should...
Borderline.
Is what? What did you say, Chaim?
Oh, I'm sorry, nothing.
They're hopping from place to place. So why should the finder not keep them? These are birds that weren't even on the fence in the first place. You have a havamin, the medadin, where they're hopping.
Were their wings tied?
Even medadin ma'alma also mutarim. If they're hopping, then they came from another place entirely. They hopped over here, and this fellow finds it. What a Christ does he have not to touch it? They're hefker, and he's totally with his rights to take the birds. Says Rashi v'medadin the makam l'makam. Right.
Excuse me, Rabbi.
Yeah.
This is this becoming an example for other situations that things are behind the fence. Somebody found something. He can't take it home right now. He leaves it there behind the fence so people will know that somebody did it intentionally. Is this an example with birds that is meant to expand to other situations?
Yes, absolutely. This is a snapshot of what happens when, and this people do this all the time. They find something, or they own something. They can't take it with them. They put it in a behind a place that they think no one will touch, and for safekeeping. So you're right. This has far-reaching implications, because what should a finder do when he sees something that is off track? It's off beat.
Yeah.
So it's off beat. The Mishnah is telling us, don't do anything. Don't do anything, because if you do something, then you're going to upset the sort of the apple cart, and that the real owner, because what he has here is not something unusual. It's unusual to him. He found a bird. The bird looks like every other one of thousands of other birds. So he can't identify the bird, but it's his bird because he put it there. So you're right. If it's something found in an unusual place, then we're being told, don't touch it, because if you do, then you're going to take it away from the real owner who put it there for a reason. So that's a good point. So this really is sort of reflective of a much larger picture of how to deal. So if I turn the Gemara here, where the Gemara says midadin, it should be mutter. So answers, the Gemara gives a two-part answer. Ikalamema ma'alma also. You could say it came ma'alma, in which case the chara you'd be right that the finder should be able to take it. It's a possibility. Or ikalamema inish it's denoi v'havale safik hinuach. In other words, when you see that bird there, you have a choice to make. Did it just hop from somewhere else, has nothing to do with the fence, and therefore it should be hefker and you should take it? Or do we say that it's safik hinuach? What is safik hinuach? not lo yachzer. So Safek Hanuach is something that you always have to grapple with because, like you say, Jay, you walk along and all of a sudden you pass this little grate and behind the grate there's a bird. So what should I think? Should I think that the bird hopped there, flew there, got there somehow? Or should I think that someone really stuffed it there in order to make sure that it's his and he can come back? So Safek Hanuach means that the circumstance is where there is a havamina that it was put there. In other words, it's not out in left field, oh, no way someone hid it there. Once you have a Safek Hanuach, there's a doubt. Was it put there intentionally? Then you got to go with it. And you got to say, Safek Hanuach lo yitol, you shouldn't take it. But if you take it, lo yachzer, you shouldn't return it for two reasons. You shouldn't return it, number one, because if you return it after the fact, the real owner may have already been looking for it and it wasn't there. And therefore he'll be miyayish and say, oh, I lost it. That's one reason lo yachzer. And the other reason lo yachzer is because truly, how are you going to identify it has no siman? So this person now has to take care of this bird until Eliyahu Navi comes. He's now charged with the ownership of a bird that he can't return to anybody. And he can't return it to the place because maybe he will be too late. Says the Gemara, Safek Hanuach. If someone actually said, you know what, this could have been put there intentionally, but I'm going to take it anyway, lo yachzer. So what do we see from this Gemara? We see from this Gemara sort of the different perspective on an Elam Metzias. Because here, the person who finds it has a different achrayus. Normally, the person who finds it says, either I'll keep it, it's mine, or I'll announce it. Here, the perspective is, no, do neither. Just leave it there. Why? Because the particular circumstance, and as you pointed out, Jay, this is generic. The particular circumstance of how he found the object should give rise to him not doing anything. Again, because it's Safek Hanuach. Now, if there was some way of looking at the item and saying, no way someone placed this. This just was thrown here, it fell off a truck full of birds, and several birds fell. If you could identify it in that fashion that it looked totally haphazard, then maybe you say it's not Safek Hanuach. But for the most part, something that finds itself behind a getter, behind some kind of a partition that, from the public, you at least have to go with the possibility that it was placed there intentionally and you shouldn't do anything. Says Rashi. Now, ma'al mahu, the ein ze hanuach. In other words, if it hopped there by itself, the ein ze hanuach, but given the ein bo simen, nema hare shalo, the finder can keep it because it hopped there by itself and has no simen. The ikar lememar inish it's the noi hol mekusharin. You see, what's the tip? The tip is that they were tied, right? The tip is that they were, even if the wings were tied. Normally, birds don't go around with wings that are intertwined; they can't fly. Once you see that bird was already sort of tampered with, if you will, and has some kind of a disability for it to fly, you at least have to have a havamina that a human being did it. So he says, Safek Hanuach, b'davar she'ein bo siman v'kol shkein badi hanuach, that already now you have a Safek, that someone tampered with this bird, put it there for a reason. And again, this is all subjective because there's no objective way of determining whether or not this is true or not. So, but you use your instinct. You walk by a gather and you see a bird that's tied up and you say to yourself, what should I do with this bird? So we're told, don't do anything. Leave it alone. You may want to come back in a few days to make sure that the bird is okay or whatever else. But l'chatchila lo yitel, you should not take it, right? There is no siman upon which you can say, all right, I'm going to put it back and someone will find it. The yafsid, and the real owner will lose because he has no siman. Hilkach lo yitl, v'habalim yisbu v'yavu v'yitlam. And we're going to rely on the fact that the balim are going to come back and they're going to take what's theirs. But in not lo yachzo doleka diyav simona. You can't. Then you can't. If you take it, you can't return it, because then already, as we said, either you've upset the real owner and he's now going to be miyayish because he figures it's not there, or who will come and take it? No one has a siman. So now you're stuck with it and you have to keep it. So that's how the Gemara wants to interpret this particular scenario. It's a little bit different than the scenarios we've learned, but yet it has, there is the Hilchos of Metzias. Now, weiter in the Mishnah told us, Matzah kli be'ashba is mechusa lo yigaba, megula notel machus. What's the reason behind it? Because if you go to a trash can's closed. So l'chayra, I mean, no one should be poking in trash cans. Okay, you open up a trash can, you see something there, and you say, I'm going to take this item. Says the Mishnah, lo yugabo. This is just like a fence. In other words, an ashba that's closed, don't go digging into it, because someone could have put something in there intentionally, and it was not meant for public eye, and therefore he shouldn't take it. Again, this is now giving us general halachas on how we're to conduct ourselves. However, megula, not lamachas. What does megula mean? You walk by a trash can, there's no lid, you see sitting something on top of the trash can, why not take it? It's not a private domain. No one stuck something for safekeeping in a trash can without a lid, because everybody walks by that space. So therefore, no to the machriz, at the very least, if we're talking about something expensive, not a piece of junk, but he should at least announce it. And someone should say, oh yes, there was a trash can at the corner of Arcola and Kersey, and I saw it, and I left it there, and I meant to come back, etc. So that's how the Mishnah posits. Frek the Gemara, Baraminu, I'll ask you a question. It's a beferish stira between our Mishnah and a brisa. Why? Because the brisa says, Motza kli tomun ba'ashba not l'machriz. There's a brisa that says if someone finds a hidden item, a hidden item in a trash can, he has to come and announce it. Our Mishnah just got saying that if it's mechusa, if it's covered, you don't touch it because it was meant to be kept there. And here we have a brisa that tells us in no uncertain terms that something hidden in an ashba is not lamachris. How do you reconcile? How do you reconcile it? Okay. So, and for the Gemara, lo kasha. Rav Zvid lo kasha. Rav Zvid said there's not a kasha here because the Mishnah and the Brisa are dealing with different circumstances. Ha b'chove v'chase, ha b'sekine v'hamnik. So let's take a look. Okay, we'll skip one Rashi. We'll go back to Kove v'chase tumunim midasu v'lo yiga behem. These are larger objects that that are in the can, so you shouldn't touch them. Sekine v'hamnik shehen kelim ketanim, small vessels of the hem, and people lose them. Shishlichum sham ima ashba. How many times have you thrown out a fork or spoon or something with your trash because they're small? Shehotziim in a bias. So in other words, with two types of trash: large trash, small trash. So we're going to see in a minute what that chilik is. Okay, let's go back one Rashi. Sheken derech ashba lifnos. V'ilo shakale hai hashlik shiyafna yitlena nochri o Yisrael choshev hilkach avedihi umuzolea. In other words, the previous Gemara said that the reason why you have to come and take it is because, according to this interpretation, if you don't take it, then someone else will come and keep it. So in other words, better you take it and be machriz than allow a nochri, or even another Yid who's not as makbid on the Shabbos Aveda, and he will come and keep it. So here you have a judgment call. Here you have something that you can ignore. Okay, I'm not going to touch it. Well, what happens? Well, we don't know. Maybe a goy will come, maybe another Yid will come. We don't know what will happen. Or I can be the Good Samaritan. I can come over, I can take it, and I can announce it. At least now the owner has a shot at getting it back. Now, he may have meant to hide it. Okay, fine, I understand. But at least if it's announced, he'll know it's his, and he'll say, okay, chaval, I meant to hide it. Someone found it, they announced it, good, I'll come get it. So it's a balancing test here. On the finder, what should he do? Should he ignore it entirely? Or should he be try to take it and be machriz, and maybe the real owner will come and get it? That's the question that the Gemara is asking.
Rabbi, what happens if you find it, you take it, and then the person, the owner, he advertises if anybody found it? So he's not relinquishing his rights.
Right, very good. So the owner himself is the one who's making the announcement, and he's saying, and he's giving details. So now the finder is on the other end, and he has to return it, because if he had announced it and the owner had come to him with those details, he definitely would have to give it to him. So if the owner anticipates and makes that announcement, then for sure he has to return it to him. Definitely.
Does he still have to give him very, very correct or intense simonim? In other words, could he just say there's about 4 or 5 birds or 10 birds? Does he have to know the exact number? Because one can fly away or have gotten away.
Right, but if he's going to tell him, where they were and more detail, that's sufficient. Yes. Yeah, we can always account for the fact that one bird may be missing or something. But if he gives him enough detail, sure, he has to return it.
But now, like in this situation where the bird may have hopped, if he says in the proximate location, he was down the field between such and such a street, and you found it a half a block further down.
Right. So there too, right. Exactly right. So there too, we take into account the fact that if the bird is capable of hopping, that he can identify it, even if it was not in the exact place where he found it, but a little bit further down, because that makes sense.
They were tied up, so that way.
They were tied up, and exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So comes Rav Zvid and he says, "Lo kasha." Why is it not a kasha? So says the Gemara, by the bigger items, lo yiga. You shouldn't touch them because those were meant to be hidden. The skine v'hamnik noto umachris. So now, the brisa that says matzah kli tomen ba'ashba noto umachris is speaking about small items, like a fork or a knife or whatever, which could easily have made its way into the trash inadvertently, says Rav Zvid. Therefore, even though it's hidden, you should announce it, because otherwise it's going to get lost. But an item that is a bigger item that's hidden, meaning it's undercover or whatever, that you shouldn't touch, because that clearly was put there intentionally. It was put there with a cover on top of it. Don't touch it. A smaller item is something that can get lost, and therefore that's what the brisa means. Now take a look at Rashi. Rashi says something very interesting. Rashi says at the end of that, Rashi skini v'hamnik, in other words, the small items. Shehen kelim ketanim of the hain, they get lost. Sheshlich masham ima ashpa, shehotzia min abayis. Because you take it out of the house and, okay, it gets lost. Fine, good. Ulakaman parach, says Rashi, but wait a minute. The Gemara asks later, Ma shekain derech ashpa lifnos. What does this have to do with covering up the can? It has nothing to do with covering up the can because we're dealing with small items that may get lost. So Rashi is anticipating the question of the Gemara according to Rav Zvid, who wants to make a chilek between large items and small items. So he says large items, you have to remain uncovered, have to remain covered. Small items, you can announce. But what does it have to do with covering? A small item, covered or uncovered, you find it in the trash can, you should announce it because clearly it doesn't belong there. Someone inadvertently threw out a knife or a fork or a spoon or whatever it happened to be. So what does it have to do with covering? That's the Gemara's kasha. If Rashi is just announcing it here, and we're going to get to that kasha in just a minute. But so in other words, it's a good kasha according to Rav Zvid, who makes a chilek here between big items and small items. Small items that get thrown in, covered or uncovered, you should announce them. What does it have to do with covering? That's the kasha of the Gemara later on. It should have nothing to do with lifnos. A little bit of an odd question, but nevertheless, if Rav Zvid wants to make that chilek, the Gemara says, okay, it's a very nice chilek, but has nothing to do with answering our brisa that says that a ashpa, that if you find something in an ashpa, you have to go not lamachris. You'd have to be not lamachris whether it was covered or not covered. What does the covering part have to do with it? That's the Gemara's kasha. Okay. Anyway, so that's Rav Zvid's chiluk. He wants to make a chiluk between big items and small items to answer the question of the stira between the Mishnah and the Brisa. Comes Rav Papa. Rav Papa Ama, no. Everything is talking about big items. One says that if it's covered, you announce, and the Mishnah says you don't. Lokasha kam ba'ashpa ha'asuya lifnois, kam ba'ashpa she'ena asuya lifnois. What does that mean? The chilek is between a trash can that may be somewhere in a corner and no one bothers it, and no one ever goes there. So no one touches the can. And versus ba'ashba or suya lifnois, that where it might be on the regular route of the trash collector. In other words, you have a can that sits in a place, and routinely gets cleaned out. And then you have those that sit maybe in someone's reshus hayachid or somewhere out in a corner, and they never get picked up. So now, so what's the chilek? The chilek is our Mishnah that talks about you don't touch it. That's talking about an ashpa that's off in the corner and no one ever bothers with it. But the ashpa, which even though it's covered, will necessarily be picked up. There, the Brisa says, if you go there first and pick it up and see something, not lamachris. You can't assume someone hit it and meant for it to stay there because it's an ashpa that someone will pick up, the sanitation department or whatever. So in other words, the Papa is saying that the chilek between the Mishnah and the Brisa is whether or not the trash can itself is going to be picked up or investigated. Where it will be.
Wait a minute. So because the trash can is on the regular route, therefore you have to be machris?
Therefore you have to be machris because there, it's going to get lost.
Yeah, you see, I would have thought that you would assume a person would never put an object on a trash can that's on the regular route, but if it's in a private area, then clearly his intent was just to hide it, and therefore you do have to be machris. But in other words, I would have thought the other way around.
So you're Chaim, you're 100% right, because the next line says, Rav Papa, what is your chilek? What are you saying? Ashba hasuya lifnas aveda midasi. An ashba, put it in a can that's going to be picked up. It's aveda midas, and aveda midas Veda Midas, everybody's.
Rabbi Hyatt teaches us not to read ahead. That was very important to him.
Right. But you exactly were mechavan to the next point. What's the point of putting it in a can that's going to be picked up by the trash? That's Aveda Midas. And Aveda Midas, the halacha of Aveda Midas is that Aveda Midas is hefker. In other words,
right, exactly.
We're not entitled to think that someone who put his trash in a place that's clearly going to be picked up, that we should be noitel machros, that we should announce it. Why should we announce it? He put it in a can. You have a trash can in your house. You put your trash, you turn it down to the corner. You don't want someone coming knocking on your door and saying, "Oh, Scott, here's your pair of socks that you stuck on top of the trash can." Of course not. It's Aveda Midas. He threw it away. So what's the Papa's chiluk? That one is a trash can that will be picked up. Our Mishnah says, it's speaking about a trash can that's off in the corner. Someone could leave it there for months. Don't bother. Don't touch that. But a trash can that will be picked up. Notel machris. Why notel machris? It's Aveda Midas. That's the kasha. Very good.
But nowadays we have large dumpsters also behind buildings or whatever. And
right.
A lot of people go looking to see what's in there. It's not like guaranteed total trash. People.
Yeah, but I would think large dumpsters like that are totally hefker. Large dumpsters like that, I don't think you have any achrayas to be machriz, especially when it's a communal dump or something, because there, when people put it in, they put it in with the idea that I'm miyayish, here, throwing it away into a dumpster. Again, not your dumpster. We're talking about a common dumpster. Their year is pretty much guaranteed.
You don't have to worry about somebody hiding something in a dumpster.
The dumpster? No, not logical. Not logical. No. So the Gemara takes a step back. You're right. If I put it straight away into a can, it's Aveda Midas. We're talking about where he put it into an ashpa that is not normally, that it's normally sealed and no one bothers. And the person whose trash can it is decided, I'm going to get rid of everything in it. In other words, if it's a private can that sits somewhere off the beaten path, don't go there. That clearly is meant for being hidden. You pick it up, you find something important, don't touch it, that's hidden. Well, so what we're talking about, this brisa, is an ashpa. Normally, it is not. It's an ashpa she'ena also lefnosa. It's not open. But whoever the owner was, v'nimla chalei lefnosa, he decided, okay, you know what? I've had it. I'm going to get rid of everything in it. So if that's the case, then the brisa is right. If all of a sudden that can is going to be removed, you have an achrayas to be machriz, because no one expected it to be dumped. They expected it to stay hidden, and you find this gem or something important. Of course, you should announce it, because the person who put it there had no anticipation that it would be revealed. So now you have to make an announcement. So obviously it's in an area where he will have heard it, then he'll say, "Oh, wait a minute, they're talking about my item, but my item was covered. No longer, it's not covered anymore because someone decided we're going to uncover it and get rid of the stuff in it." That brisa, according to Rav Papa, is the circumstance where you do have to announce. Okay, so now we have a chilik in Rav Papa. Zak the Gemara. Bishloim Rav Papa hanadik tani shekain derech ashpa lifnas. According to Rav Papa, now we understand what it means. That we're talking about a can that is normally it's not automatically removed. But according to Ela Rav Zvid, ma shekain derech ashpa lifnas. What does it mean derech lifnos. Now, so this is the kasha that Rashi asked. Remember, I said that Rashi said, well, come on, later on, the Gemara is going to ask, what does his teretz have to do with lifnos? What does it have to do with an ashpa that you open? He was talking about small utensils, and small utensils, it doesn't matter. You see them in a trash can, you always have to announce them because you always have to assume that they were inadvertently thrown away. So this is the kasha. What does it have to do with a covered can or non-covered can? We're talking about small items that have to be taken and announced because clearly someone threw them away inadvertently. So according to Rav Papa, we understand why that brisa uses the term derech ashpa lifnos, to be clear. But according to Rav Zvid, mashikein derech ashpa lifnos. What does it have to do with the trash can being cleared? Right? These are items that should normally be retrieved. And for the Gemara, you have to change the language. So he changes the language. Shekain derech ashpa lifnos lo kelim ketanim. Okay, that in other words, the lashon he uses is that people throw kelim ketanim into this trash can, and therefore you have to be mindful that. Remember, what does the brisa say? The brisa says, "Motzekli tomim ba'ashpa not lamachris." So now he means motzekli kelim ketanim. According to Rav Zvid, this brisa should really read Motzeh Kalim Ketanim Tomim Ba'ashba Not Lamachris. You find little kalim, forks, knives, spoons, all kinds of things that can easily be transferred into a trash can when you're moving. Keys. I mean, how many times does a key fall into a trash can? You move it away, whatever. So according to Rav Zvid, you have to add that language in order to understand the brisa. Otherwise, the brisa makes no sense because he's talking about small items and stuff, and what does it have to do with stuff hidden in a can? It has nothing to do with it. So that's his terrace. So take a look at Rashi. Aveda medasi, right? We say it's aveda medas, so of course it should be a hefker. Because in other words, the bottom are the ones who choose to hide it there. Lifnos lo kelim ketanim min habaya shalom medas. Okay, so what do we find here? So the Gemara amplifies on the Mishnah that when the Mishnah says kli ashpa, the difference between mechusa and megula. So clearly, if it's megula, it's aveda medas. If someone puts something into an open trash can, it's aveda medas. I mean, he doesn't mean to hide it. If someone puts it into a closed trash can, then we already have a discussion between this Mishnah and the Brisa as to whether or not what you should do with it. So according to the Mishnah, you do nothing with it. You leave it there and you assume that someone is going to come back and take it. And according to the Brisa, you're noted lamachris, either because of Rav Zvid, because people constantly lose things in a trash can, therefore you should announce it because it was not intentional, or according to Rav Papa, who says that that we're talking about a trash can that is not, the difference between a trash can that is normally evacuated and one that is not. So if it's one that's normally not evacuated, no problem. If it's one that was not evacuated, but all of a sudden they became evacuated, then you have an achrayus to be neitel lamachris. In other words, if you see a can, you walk by it, week after week, no one touches it. All of a sudden, you see the trash company is coming and is about to take it, meaning that they now someone has decided to pick it up. Then you have the ability to look into it, pick it up, and see something of importance. You have to take it and be machriz, and can't just say, "Oh, no problem, I'm just going to leave it there." So that's Rav Papa's chilik. that you have that achrayus. According to Rav Zvid, really has nothing to do with it because you constantly will find things in trash cans that don't belong. I mean, none of us really go walking along picking up trash cans to see what's in it. But the fact of the matter is that if you do, and you happen to see something that seemingly has some value, you should be neitel machriz, at least according to this brisa, because otherwise it might get lost. And we're talking about a trash can, not in your private domain, in your backyard, sitting 50 yards off the street. Don't go there. No one should touch that because that more than likely is a hiding place. But we're talking about a trash can that, is I don't know, you might find it at the corner of, in the shopping center or something. I mean, no one goes trash diving, but if you happen to pick it up and see it, you should take it and be machriz because that's a trash can that is likely to be removed. So again, you don't have an achrayus to do it, but if you do it, you should be neitel machriz because otherwise a nachri may take it, or someone else may take it, or it'll be totally lost through the trash company. So again, a little halacha l'maaseh here to think about in terms of what you should do. All right, so that's a little bit of an unusual Mishnah, and gives us a little bit of a different perspective on Metzias. Now, the next Mishnah also gives us a different perspective on Metzias. Motza begal ubekosel yasha. What happens? You're walking in a place that is off the beaten path, and you find a gal. A gal is a pile of rocks, or a kosel yashan, a very, very old wall dating to Vesachvi. Then Hari Elu Shalo, says the Mishnah. If you find a Metzia in that circumstance, Hari Elu Shalo. Motza begal, says Rashi, gal avonim mechoma shenafla. Hari Elu Shalo b'gemar mufarish. Says the Mishnah Vayter, Motza bekosel chodosh. If you find it in a new wall, mechetza v'lechut shalo, mechetza v'lefnim shebalabayis. You're walking along, I don't know, Foxhole Road. Foxhole Road has homes that have walls all around them. And you walk along Foxhole Road and you come to a place and there's a hole in the wall. And you stick your hand in the wall. And out comes, I don't know, something expensive. Says the Mishnah, and now let's say that the wall is 3 feet deep, the 3 foot deep wall. Zok the Mishnah, from the midpoint to the outside, meaning 1.5 feet, shalom, belongs to you. You're a finder, it's yours. But from that midpoint to the inside, if you stick your hand and your hand somehow, you have a long hand and your hand goes beyond the midpoint deep into the hole and you pull out an Hermé scarf worth $300, that you cannot keep because that's chetzia shabalabayis. Zayzak the Mishnah. What happens if he rented this house and the wall, everything? He rented it out. It was a rental property. Even if he gets his hand well into the hole beyond the midpoint, it belongs to him. Says Rashi, one of the holes of the wall which faces the Rishus Rabbim, right? It's Foxhole Road. Somebody walked by and he saw a hole and he stuck something in it. I mean, this is the Gemara, the Mishnah is telling us this is the Havamina of what we should think, that it doesn't belong to the owner. He wouldn't have stuck it into the wall from the Rishus Rabbim side. Who would have stuck it in? A person walking by. You know, he has something in his pocket. You know what? He's walking along. he sees a couple of unsavory characters, and he's afraid he's going to be robbed. He quickly takes something out of his pocket, sticks it into the wall, right? Very, very plausible. And now, after the encounter, he'll come back and he'll pick up his wallet, whatever happens to be. So if you find it, in other words, time has gone by and you found it, we assume that he put it there b'shochach and he forgot it. Wait a minute, we just got through saying sofik hinuach. If it seems like someone put it there, we shouldn't touch it, right? That's chat sofik hinuach. That, yeah, there's a likelihood someone hid it there. So you know what? You should take the position that I shouldn't take it. This is a vada hinuach. This isn't a sofik hinuach. Why? So again, we're going to have to see the Gemara later on, but somehow we extrapolate from this that if someone put it in there, even if it was hinuach, he meant to put it in, after a period of time, we say that there was, since it was put in from the Rishus HaRabim's side, he may have already thought, you know what, forget about it. There was a hole there. People walk by, they stick their hand in there. My stuff is gone. I have no havamina of getting it.
How does this relate to the previous statement that the half that's all the way on the side of the owner, that's the owner's? I mean, this seems to, the logic here doesn't seem to jibe with that logic. I mean, why would...
So what Rashi is explaining is that when a person who has something of value and he wants to ditch it quickly, he'll stick it in. He's not going to stick it in 3 feet.
But he might. He sees a hole. He's not thinking that this wall is someone else's.
You're right. You're right. He might. But the Gemara is saying that we're going to now go with a certain logic. A person walks by, he needs to quickly unload. He's not going to take his hand and meticulously find the very end of the wall and stick it to the end of the wall. He'll quickly push it into the wall and move on. So therefore, I could have said 1/3 and 2/3.
Now, I would disagree, but my question is, where is the logic that half goes to the owner? Because the owner would never stick something into a hollow area of his own surrounded wall that's protecting
why would he not do it from the inside? Maybe
because the whole thing is his property. It's more implausible.
So hold on. The owner has children, and the children play with all kinds of things.
Okay.
And they play hide and go seek, and they play all these things.
They could put a toy in there or anything. Yes.
They could put a toy. They could put a gem. They could put anything in there. Okay. So we at least have to give him some bilus over a portion of the wall.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So Rashi is trying to explain here, and Rashi is saying that it's not like sofik hinuach. It's not like sofik hinuach, because when you put something into a place like that, first of all, it's not a geder. It's not a private place, like we said, where no one goes. This is the Rishus HaRabim. People are walking by this wall all the time. So we can't say that he's hiding it from the rest of the world. You walk up behind, I mean, I don't know, curiosity. Don't people walk by and they see a hole in the wall? Don't people want to peek into the wall and see what's in that wall? I mean, it's a natural phenomenon. So you can't say he hid it behind a fence. No one should see it. So there is a difference here. So therefore, the whole concept of sofik hinuach doesn't really work. So the Mishnah says that in that case, you know what? We're going to make a pshara. We're going to make a compromise. Half the wall is Rishus HaRabim, half the wall is Rishus HaYachid. So you say, yeah, go ahead.
Does this have anything to do with when it comes to chametz, how you have to search? Because they used to have pockets in walls, and when we studied the whole thing of searching chametz on Pesach. So if he has this thing, does that in any way relate to the fact of that it's usable and it has to get searched, and even if part of it is outside, he still would have to?
Absolutely. The Gemara Pesachim talks about that, and the Gemara and the halacha, of course, but the Gemara Pesachim talks about your responsibility to search into the cracks of your wall. Now, the Gemara there, if I remember correctly, does not require you to search into the hole all the way out into the Rishus Harabim. In other words, you have to search into the crack, and you go as far as you go. But there is a logic to saying that if a person is going to hide something, he's going to hide it within the confines of the wall closest to him, right? So if you have a thick enough wall, you're not achroi to go to the other end of the wall to see if there's chametz there, because that chametz would be hefker. If someone put chametz in there and just walked away, that can't be attributed to the balabos, to the balabais.
If the balabos sticks his hand in the regular case that somebody may have put something in the outside part from Rishus Harabim, if he goes and puts his hand all the way out, he can actually pull it into the house.
That's right. So there, the question might be how far he can extend his hand. Yeah. I said 3 feet. What happens if the wall is 5 feet? Yeah. I mean, in other words, whatever the size of the wall, we're saying it's half and half. If he can get his hand in up to the point where he could have reached, and there's chametz, that's his chametz. Beyond that, he doesn't have to worry.
But
beyond that,
if something is hidden and he can reach beyond half, can he take it in?
If he can reach beyond half, yes, then he should try to take it in. But if you have a wall that's so deep that your hand goes part way, even if it's more than halfway, you go that difference. But that's the Gemara in Pesachim. So you really, you're correct that in those days when they had walls and all these other things, that's why in your own house you have an achrayus to look into all the little crevices, into all the little places, right?
Cases are not tied together, though, is what I was asking. Chametz versus something found in the wall.
Right. So it's a balancing thing. You have to go as far as you can normally. As far as your arm would have put chametz into the wall, that's how far in you have to go to retrieve. If your hand won't go more than, let's say, I don't know, 1.5 feet, 2 feet, that's where you have to go. You can't go into the next. Now, what was the last part of the Mishnah? The Mishnah said, "Va'afilu motzeh b'toch habayis," even if you found it in the house and it's a rental, you don't return it. Lo yodua d'maninu ubalov noashu. So this is an interesting. The Gemara will explain a little bit more later. In other words, l'chayra, if you rent your house, why should you not search your house? And if you find it, then try to return it to the last renter, or any renter, but the last renter. So the teretz is not, and we're going to see in the Gemara why even the last renter, the one that you most remember, you have no achrayus to return. So, all right, so that's the Mishnah. So then maybe we stop here because we'll go into the Gemara next week. But anyway, you see that these Mishnayos are a little bit different than what we've been learning till now in terms of Bava Metzia, because normally a person loses something and the whole focus is on the finder. Here, these Mishnahs deal with the person who's losing them in unusual circumstance, and what a finder is supposed. What's the achrayus of the finder based on the circumstance of the loss? A little bit of a different perspective, but nevertheless, these are very common. I mean, even in our own life, it's very easy to come across if you're on vacation and you come across a wall and the wall is collapsed and you find something very unusual or whatever it happens to be. This is the real live case. Is what do you do? What do I make an announcement? Do I not make an announcement? Do I return it? Do I not return it? So it's a firsthand primer for us as to how and what our responsibilities are to Hashavas Aveda. All right, so Mitzvah, next week we'll pick up from the bottom of Kafei Medbeis from the Gemara.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.